Airing first on Asheville FM, WSFM LP 103.3 FM in Asheville, this is The Final Straw, a weekly anarchist and anti-authoritarian radio show broadcasting out of occupied Cherokee land in southern Appalachia. We bring you voices and perspectives from projects and struggles all around the world.
This episode contains two segments. First, I interviewed Mark and an anonymous member of the Internationalist Commune of Rojava, which coordinates civil structure engagements among internationals in North Eastern Syria in the Rojava Revolution, as well as helping to spread the ideas and news about what's going on there internationally. More on their project can be found at internationalistcommune.org, or you can check out related projects like makerojavagreenagain.org, or follow #RiseUpForRojava. That may be organizing in your area. The U.S. government, which has been supporting Rojava militarily in their struggle against Daesh or ISIS, is at the conference table with the Turkish government currently to carve out parts of northern Syria that is predominantly Kurdish, and Turkey has been noted to have given aid and weapons to Daesh and has opposed Kurdish dignity and survival within its own borders, exemplified by the conflict from 1978 until today, which was relit by Erdogan. The guests and I speak about Turkish buildup on the border of Syria, about incarceration and care of Daesh prisoners by Rojava, and how folks internationally can offer support to Rojava at this tense time.
Next, I had the chance to speak with Smogulkem, who is a hereditary chief of the Likhts'amisyu clan of the Wet'suwet'en people. He is a teacher and builder and was one of the people who helped make the Unistoten camp, who are another clan of the Wet'suwet'en people. Unistoten camp is an indigenous reoccupation of land stolen by the state of Canada in so-called BC, and has done a lot of resistance against pipelines and other incursions by Canada. More about this can be found at unistoten.camp. We talk a little bit about his experiences organizing that, but more so we're focusing on another indigenous reoccupation project on traditional Likhts'amisyu territory, some of the history involved in this reoccupation camp, about the nature of the state of Canada, the Climate and Environmental Research Center that is forming a central component of the village, aid that they need, and many more topics.
The Final Straw is a member of the Channel Zero network of anarchist podcasts, and here's a jingle from another member of CZN.
In the eyes of the government, we are the enemy.
In a world where there is no government, anarchy rules. This summer, get ready for the most action-packed podcast.
We continue fighting because we hate all authority and love freedom, which cannot be given, but must be taken.
Such scenes as, this is not a dialogue, a crime called freedom, party's over, and many, many more.
For more text and audio material of interest to anarchists,
check out resonanceaudiodistro.org.
And now some words from anarchist prisoner Sean Swain.
What you say, what you say, what you say, what? We'll come like a blood!
If you're in the United States and you don't want to die in the next mass shooting, you have to be careful. There are some places you just don't want to go. For instance, schools. Don't step foot in a school. Schools are magnets for mass shooters. And it doesn't matter what kind of school. Colleges, high schools, grade schools, kindergartens, pre-K, it doesn't matter. Also, places of worship. Churches, mosques, synagogues, anywhere you might go to talk to God, stay away or you might end up having FaceTime with God you really weren't counting on. Workplaces. If you have a job, quit. Shooters love to shoot up the workplace. And movie theaters. Remember the guy in Colorado? And malls, Walmarts. Don't go shopping. Concerts, don't forget that shooter in Vegas. So what does that leave? Surprisingly, restaurants. It appears that restaurants are pretty safe so far, but don't go anywhere else. In fact, if you live in the U.S. and you don't want to die as a victim of a mass shooting, you might want to move. I'm trying to convince my elderly parents to go to Canada. They don't have gun violence in Canada. Problem is, if we all try to go to Canada, They're going to build a wall and make the United States pay for it. Can't even blame them. Imagine if your neighbors acted like we do. Some statistics. August 4th was the 216th day of the year. That day, mass shooting number 250 happened in Dayton. That's 250 mass shootings in the U.S. in only 216 days. I did the math. That averages out to 1.16 shootings per day. More than a mass shooting per day. Just to put this in context, we don't have a mass shooting once a year, or once a month, or once a week, or even just once a day. In 2019, so far, we've had more than a mass shooting per day. That's more than a mass shooting every single day. At the rate we're going, we're going to have more than 422 mass shootings by the end of the year. And really, it might be even more than that. Consider we haven't gotten into the back-to-school mass shooting season yet. We've got 3 months of disappointment and rejection and bullying to fuel the mass shooting statistics before Christmas break. Now consider the death toll. You can add up all the deaths of U.S. soldiers in the endless oil wars from 2018 and 2019, and those deaths don't equal the mass shooting deaths in just the first week of August. More Americans were killed by mass shooters in the first week of August than were killed in 2 ongoing wars overseas for the last 2 years. So if you want to stay safe, you need to buy an Army surplus uniform and a parachute and jump out of a plane over Damascus or Kabul or Baghdad. One of the only good things that has come out of this recent spat of mass shootings is that the United States and its corporate media are at least paying lip service to the idea that they might have a problem with violent, racist white guys. Newsflash, I think you've had that problem since 1492. Not to in any way discourage this newfound introspection, and not to disparage the baby steps this country might be taking to grapple with issues of race and violence, but by my math, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria showed up 527 years ago. We're just now noticing the bloodstains? Come on. White American males have been slaughtering people, particularly brown people, officially and unofficially for years. No, for decades. No, scrap that. For centuries. White guys with guns should be the subtitle for any American history book. We're now all scared and afraid because, for centuries, we've been too stupid to be ashamed. The pinnacle of our racist, violent stupidity currently occupies the White House and stokes the flames of this idiocy. I remember when his opponent in 2016 referred to Trump's supporters as a basket of deplorables, and she took heat for that. Well, a few deplorables have fallen out of that asshole's basket and shot people. And rather than confront this for what it really is, rather than admit that the president is really an accomplice to hate crimes and mass murder, the corporate media and corporate political parties are rationalizing and justifying his hate speech and his support for neo-Nazis and Klansmen. He's not going to stop. Neither are the mass shootings. There's no solution coming. Why should those in charge do anything about this? They've got Secret Service protection. They don't have to shop at the El Paso Walmart. We have 142 more days until the new year. And at this rate, 173 more mass shootings, mostly committed by angry white guys with guns. I sure hope my parents move to Canada. This is anarchist prisoner Sean Swain in exile from Ohio at Buckingham Correctional in Dillwyn, Virginia. If you're arming yourselves against racist white guys, in uniform and out, you are the resistance.
You can write to Sean Swain at his latest address at Sean Swain, number 2015638, Buckingham Correctional, P.O. Box 430, Dillwyn, Virginia, 23936. You can find his past writings, recordings of his audio segments, and updates on his case at seanswain.org, or now follow him on Twitter at SwainRocks. Would you please introduce yourself and the Internationalist Commune of Rojava for listeners? Who's in it? What do you all believe? Where are you from? And where are you based, for instance?
Hello, and thanks a lot for having the chance and the possibility to speak today about the current situation in Rojava, in the North East Syria, but also to speak about the internationalist work we are doing here. My name is Mark. I'm since 1.5 years in Rojava, and I'm a member of the Internationalist Commune. The Internationalist Commune was formed in spring 2017, and it was formed as an organizational and political structure for internationalists who come to the revolution. And the Commune was, back in the days, the first civil structure for internationalists. You might know, for example, YPG International or YPG International, which are part of the military, the self-defense structure in Rojava. The Internationalist Commune is a structure for internationalists working in the civil structure, for example, in the youth structure, in the women's structure, in medical structures, and media work. So this is where internationalists from the Internationalist Commune find their place in the revolution. The idea of the commune is to, first of all, that internationals have the chance to learn from this revolution. So how does the organizational frame in the revolution works, how the society is organizing itself, how the civil structures are built up in this revolution, but also which kind of ideological backgrounds this revolution is based on. The second pillar is to support this revolution in terms of a practical contribution. We as internationals have the chance, for example, to communicate in different languages what is happening here. We might bring some skills with us from our experiences and leftist revolutionary struggles all around the world. So we have also to something which we can contribute to this revolution, the practical works, the ideological developments, and so on. And the third part of the internationalist commune is also that it is important that we as internationals organize ourselves in Rojava, but also outside Rojava and the countries we are coming from and the structures we are coming from. The best way to support this revolution is also to organize ourselves for it, to be able to defend it, and even to be able to build up a radical, democratic, revolutionary process in the countries we are coming from. For this works, the Internationalist Commune has decided to build an academy for internationals, a place where internationals can arrive new to Rojava, to learn the ideological backgrounds of this revolution, to have the chance to get to know the culture of this region, and to increase their language skills, also to be later on able to participate in the different works which provide for internationals, where internationals have the chance to get to know the society and the works better. The Internationalist Commune has started also to work in several fields. So one of the projects you also may have heard about is the campaign Rise Up for Rojava. So actually to build links to different radical organizations all around the world, which are able to commonly to defend the revolution, mainly in Europe, but also in America. There are structures we are in contact with. The other works the Internationalist Commune started is the campaign Make Rojava Green Again. It is our ecological works to contribute also in this field of to build up a democratic and ecological society in Rojava, but at the same time also to learn from the ideological here, which can give answers to the questions we are also having in other parts of this world, how to build up an ecological society, how ecological struggles are interconnected with the question of radical democracy, women's liberation, and then cooperative economy. So also in these fields, we have the chance to learn from the revolution here.
The name Rojava has been circulated in radical circles for a bit now and has some cachet. We'll be using that term intermittently with autonomous administration of North and East Syria, which doesn't quite roll off the tongue in the same way. Can you talk about this naming change as you understand it?
Yes, it is right. The revolution in Syria is mainly known as the Rojava Revolution, which also makes sense because Rojava is the heart of the revolution. If we remember where this revolution started, where cities like Derek, Kamishlu, Kobani, which are cities that are mainly Kurdish towns and cities. So Rojava means west, and it is the area that is along the Turkish borderline. It is the west part of whole Kurdistan, which is today separated in 4 parts, and the one that is under control of the Turkish state, it's named Bakur, and the one that is under control of the Iranian state, Rujilat, which means east, and the one that is in the Iraqi territory, that is Bashur. So, and Rojava is the area, the Kurdish area in the Syrian state. How does this name changed? Because also the revolution changed. The revolution spreaded also in other areas, which are not mainly Kurdish areas. So especially with the victory over the Islamic State and the defense of Kobani, the revolutionary forces, the SDF, the Syrian Democratic Forces, and YPG and YPG advanced into the mainly Arabic areas like cities like Deir ez-Zor, Raqqa, Manbij, and so on. And also there, the population started to build up autonomous structures like in Rojava, based on the 3 principles of radical democracy, women's liberation, and ecology. And these areas joined the revolution, joined this new administrative structure without a centralistic state. So also to include this different people, like different cultures, different religions, to include them into this revolutionary process, it is also important that also it is representative in the name of this federation, let's say, in this territory.
Can you briefly remind listeners about the outcome of the invasion of Afrin by Turkish forces and how the area fares now?
Afrin, prior to attack on January 20th in 2018, was one of the more peaceful, even bountiful regions in Rojava. During the attacks themselves, there was a large loss of life and the natural destruction that comes with warfare, specifically airstrikes. After the attacks, Afrin has become occupied by the Turkish state and suffers greatly on many levels. Turkey seeks to make a demographic change and yet again erase Kurdish culture. Kurdish cultural symbols and statues have been destroyed and removed. Everything has been renamed in Turkish. Turkish flags fly everywhere, including in Kurdish majority schools, where Erdogan's face is also hanging everywhere, and the children are forced to chant pro-Erdogan, pro-Turkey slogans. It's cultural genocide. There's also been a lot of intentional natural destruction and exploitation. Afrin is quite well known for its olive trees, which the Turkish state has either set fire to, as well as other farmland, or pillaged the trees for wood, the fields for other produce, which it has sent back to Turkey. According to Amnesty International, human rights abuses against citizens are now occurring on a regular basis, from displacement to torture, unjustified detentions, regular artillery attacks. The people of Afrin are currently suffering a tremendous oppression under the occupation.
We were bothering you for this interview because Erdogan and the AKP are at it again. Your website refers to Day X and the threat of a Turkish invasion. Can you talk about what's happening at the border with Turkey?
Since several months now, the Turkish army has intensified their presence at the border towards Rojava. But since more than a year, almost more than 2 years, the Turkish state has built a wall all the border between Rojava, the west part of Kurdistan, and the north part in Bakur, and occupied by the Turkish state. This wall is one of the longest walls in the world, and it is protected by several towers, armed vehicles, and several times also the Turkish soldiers have shot over this border, even killing farmers that are working close to the borderline, and even school kids who were on their way to their school. So the border, it's a constant threat and a constant place of provocation, and the Turkish state tries to provocate it also, the civilians, the revolution at the borderline. So in the last years, especially in winter 2018, several announcements were already made by the regime in Ankara to threaten the revolution, to occupy further land in Rojava. And since then, especially in the region of Jarablus, the Turkish army has pulled troops together, but not only the official army, but also gangs, we can say, that are even members of Daesh and other Islamist groups like Al-Nusra are part of this, to threaten with a big invasion, which is now becomes more concrete, especially after the last announcement by several Turkish politicians from MHP, but also from AKP government, saying we will wipe out this revolution, and wants to build this corridor under the control of the Turkish authorities. So in this sense, we are mobilizing for this Day X. In the moment of a heavy attack, we want to be ready to respond also in an international context, to show that people are behind this revolution, are supporting this revolution, and not accepting also the policy of their states in terms of supporting the Turkish fascist state with weapons, with arms, with diplomatic power. So this is the current situation, but it can change easily from time to time.
So Turkey is a NATO member state, the second largest military in that treaty organization, besides the US, in fact, and was documented to harbor Daesh and ISIS militants. Can you talk about the relationship between Daesh and Turkey?
Connection between Turkey and Daesh is undeniable. The question is not whether the connection exists, it's how deep does it go. We know many international ISIS members have traveled through the Turkish border to get to Syria, and Turkey has looked the other way, allowing its border to become a gateway for fighters, weapons, and other supplies. Many Daesh commanders have spoken openly about Turkish support. In fact, many former Daesh members can now be seen in Afrin as part of Turkish forces. Apparently, during a United States raid in July of 2015, there was evidence found which proved direct collaboration, though the evidence was never revealed to the public. Allegations go so deep as to imply Turkey has provided financial, logistical support, and military training.
Rojava, or the Autonomous Administration, now controls Raqqa, which was held for a long time by Daesh. What has the administration done to Daesh prisoners? How have the outside states dealt with captured Daesh soldiers? And can you talk about the continued attacks on infrastructure and harvests by Daesh?
Several 10,000s of Daesh fighters are imprisoned by the Autonomous Administration in the North Eastern Syria. And they are located in different cities and different prisoners, but especially with the end of the the so-called Islamic State, there are bigger camps which are under the control of the Autonomous Administration and the self-defense forces. Everywhere where Daesh prisoners exist, there's the try to give them education, to learn about the ideology of the movement, to convince them to a better understanding of the reality they were living in and they are still living in, and to give them the chance to develop themselves. There are several examples, for example, in the prisons of Kamishlu, where also with the methods of art and culture, the people are trying to convince also former Daesh soldiers. But for sure, and it is clear that there are also really radical ideological leaders of Daesh, that there is no chance actually, to convince them from something different. So also we have to face the reality that there will be long-term prisoners of Daesh, and especially the topic of international Daesh fighters. It's a big question right now, and it's also discussed on the international level. So until today, not many countries from the West have agreed to take back former fighters. It is still many countries take an excuse and saying we are not in contact with the autonomous administration, so we cannot actually take care to bring them back, even they don't want, which makes sense in the eyes of the European states. But in the end, they have to take them back as well. It is not the responsibility of the autonomous administration to take care about all this Daesh fighters. Just to give an example, from Germany, around 400 people are there, which are former fighters or which are relatives of these fighters, even children that are born in the so-called Islamic State from parents from Germany with German passports. So this is a big topic in the moment, and many countries don't want to accept them. For the autonomous administration, it is also a big diplomatic offense right now to negotiate about the well-being of these fighters and the imprisonment and the relatives. But it is a really difficult situation. So we have seen in the last weeks in camps like Al-Hol, for example, where around 70,000 relatives, mainly women and children, are imprisoned or under control by the self-defense forces, that it is hard to convince them from a different understanding and ideology. So even in these camps, the ideology of the Islamic State continues to live, and we have seen videos where kids are raising again the flag of the Islamic States. And we have to also admit that there are many Daesh fighters that are not captured yet, who are organizing themselves in smaller cells right now, changing their strategy of warfare towards guerrilla warfare with a smaller sabotage, with bomb attacks, and with burning fields, which was a big problem in the last month, that thousands of hectares of wheat was burned by cells of Daesh to, first of all, harm the economical situation of the autonomous administration, but on the other side, to increase the contradictions in the society between the people. And now everyone is talking about who was it, and the other ones say the Christian were the ones who burned the fields, the other ones say the Kurds did it, and so on. So to increase the contradictions in the society, that it's a strategy of this kind of attacks. But for sure, it's also to spread the fear between the society. For example, bombs attacks in Karmishlu in front of the church. It's a clear signal, it's a message to the Christian society, and it is the try to make them believe that the revolution is not able to protect them.
In your view, what's at stake with a possible Turkish invasion? How can people outside support the project of an anti-patriarchal, pro-ecological, heterogeneous, and anti-capitalist autonomous North and East Syria?
Though the situation fluctuates, the Democratic Federation of Northern Syria is under very real, constant threat from the Turkish state. If Turkey attacks, everything is at stake. The principles of the revolution and what they can mean for the whole world could be lost. A Turkish attack would be an attack against civilians and against Kurdish culture itself. Also, many Daesh prisoners are currently being kept here, hopefully waiting for trial or to be repatriated. If Turkey attacks and Rojava's security is compromised, we risk another rise of Daesh. We need comrades outside of Rojava to firstly educate themselves, to truly, deeply understand what the principles of this revolution are, to keep them alive and spread them. And secondly, to publicize them with the methods at your disposal. Show your communities, the world what is being built here and what Turkey is threatening to destroy. Show Turkey to be the fascist state that it is. Don't allow your communities to ignore or forget what is happening here. The internationalist method is a double-edged sword. We need internationalists to come here and do works here. But for internationalist revolution, we need a presence across the world, spreading our principles and spreading awareness. That's your job, your role in this international revolution.
If you appreciate the work that we do on the show, please consider supporting us monetarily. We have a Patreon with thank you gifts of t-shirts, mixtapes, stickers, and more if you care to make a monthly donation of as little as $5, although we'll take down to $1 if you care to do a monthly donation by that amount at Patreon. Or you can write out, purchase merch at our Big Cartel shop, or make donations via Venmo or PayPal. More info on our site by clicking the donate or support tab, or by visiting tfsr.wtf/support.
Excellent. Thank you so much for making the time to talk with me for this interview. Would you begin by introducing yourself for listeners and telling us a bit about yourself?
My name is Smogulsim. I'm the hereditary chief of the Fariwi clan of the Wet'suwet'en Nation, and I'm presently helping organize the reoccupation of an ancient village site of our people out in our lands. We're kind of late coming into the reoccupation part of the initiatives that the Wet'suwet'en are doing, because I think a lot of you know last January 7th, there was a raid that happened with the Gidimt'en access point where people were arrested on that raid, and the raid party moved up into Unistoten and disassembled the blockade that they had up there to stop intruders from coming into the territory. And it was all in part of a court injunction that was filed by the Coastal GasLink pipeline company. It was a natural pipeline that they want to put through there. And they basically achieved their initiative of getting an injunction against the Wet'suwet'en people. Originally, it was just against the Unistoten, but shortly after, they realized that Gidimt'en had assembled a camp and put it in the way of their machines from getting in. They expanded the injunction without contacting the defendants or anybody else in the Wet'suwet'en Nation, which is a meeting between the company and the judge. And they amended the injunction to include the entire right-of-way through the Wet'suwet'en territories. I was one of the main coordinators up at Unistoten camp since it, and I've since moved away. And at the beginning of August, actually it was the end of December, I made the decision to not go back to Unistoten camp for personal reasons. My mother was dying at that time. When the raid was actually happening, I was picking out a casket for my mother. I was watching the raid unfold on my phone and all the messages that were coming out of it. The company actually delivered the injunction to me, the notice to go to court, at my mother's bedside. She was at home, right? And the company actually hired a guy to come out and deliver all the documents to me while I was sitting by my mom.
That's horrible.
Yeah, that's the Corporation of Canada and all of the businesses that run under it.
Yeah. I recently learned or was educated about the nature of the so-called Canadian state and was really surprised to learn that it is just a corporation, like under the rule of the British Queen.
Yeah, quite literally. That's exactly what it is. And that's we refer to it as that. They're an operated business that's basically fronting stolen goods to the world. Especially if you travel through BC and parts of eastern Canada and a little bit of Alberta with the Lubicons, you're coming across unceded territory. Even if that are ceded, they broke those treaties a long time ago. And they've had no intention of ever repairing relationships other than attempting to maintain the status quo all the way across the board. So Indigenous people from all over Turtle Island are rising up now in an attempt to take on the corporation and all of its subsidiaries.
It's amazing, and I think that our show mostly airs in land that is so-called United States, and I think that folks who live here tend to have some kind of like weird, creepy love affair with Canada, and I think that it cannot be overstated how just insidious and evil the so-called state of Canada is. So thank you for your words on that.
Well, colonialism left its ugly mark all over the planet. And, it reared its ugly head on January 7th against our people. My clan, because my mother is from my clan, she's one of our chiefs. All of my other chiefs from my clan are all related to her, so that when she passed, I ended up having to back away from the entire confrontation. But over time, since her passing in January, we've gone back out as soon as spring hit and decided to reoccupy our territories as well. So, process of building cabins right now out on our lands, and building a village at an old site that our people were forced off of.
Would you say where Likhts'amisyu territory is, and would you talk about your people and your history on the land?
Well, we have a number of territories throughout the larger Wet'suwet'en. Like, we have 22,000 square kilometers of Wet'suwet'en territory, makes up the exterior boundary of our lands. But the Likhts'amisyu territories, there's a number of territories. But the one that we are reoccupying right now is south of Houston, about 35-minute drive down a logging road called Buck Flats and Parrot Trail. If people are interested in looking for it, they can always just Google map it, just put Parrot Lake Recreation Site, and the map should bring it right to where our village is.
Is that where Parrot Lake is?
Yeah. So it's a recreation site. You just have to Google map that in, and you should be able to find it.
The questions that I have are more geared towards sort of the summer camp. Would you prefer to talk about the reoccupation a little bit more over this?
Well, the reoccupation is basically the summer camp. We have a summer camp that's active right now, and we have orders that have been coming in. Like, we had a guy coming in from Syria recently, and he just traveled back to Toronto. He's one of the Syrian refugees. We just had another guy in from Nigeria about 3 weeks ago, and he was out for about a week helping us. But we have crews of people coming in from Toronto and Ottawa, down on the Lower Mainland. There's a guy from California there right now, just basically helping us out. And I just want to lend a hand. It's not a resistance camp; it's a reoccupation camp. But that doesn't mean that we're going to sit by idly if the company decides to push its way through that part of the territory.
Definitely. Thank you for that clarification. I'm personally really interested in people's stories about how they came to do the work or so-called or activism they currently do. Would you be willing to speak on that from your personal perspective?
Yeah, I could do that. I think it might have started way back when I was a child, first of all. My grandparents, I spent a lot of time with them out on the territories. And as a small child, I remember sitting in the vehicle with my grandparents, and my grandmother was the one that did all the talking to me. And she only spoke our language, and I understood a lot of her language, but one of my uncles was always nearby to always make sure that I understood exactly what she was saying. But as we were traveling through all the territories, she would, my grandfather was paralyzed, so he couldn't even speak. He had a stroke. He mumbled stuff, and my grandma knew what he was talking about. So he'd stop at a place, mumble stuff to her, and then she'd tell me in Wet'suwet'en, stuff like, this is the boundary line of your territory. When you get out of the truck, if you stand there and look up at that mountain, and there's a beaver pond that you always go catching trout at. She said, that's the boundary line for your territory. So everything from this part on, down the river, is your territory until it joins this river. So I grew up with those types of teachings. And one of the other things she told me was she said, when you grow up, it's going to be your responsibility to take care of this territory. You have to look after the animals, you have to look after the land, and make sure that it's going to be there for all of your future generations. And it's remarkable that she's quite clear in the way that she gave those directions to me, because it wasn't like she didn't say, you're going to have to try and wrestle it away from the government, or you're going to have to deal with corporations that are out there right now. She actually said, when you grow up, you have to look after your territories for your future generations. And that's something that I went by my entire life. Like I did a lot of stuff like a lot of other young people did. I moved away for a while, did different things, but I kept getting drawn back to my lands. And because of the way I was raised in the bush, I ended up doing a lot of stuff out in the bush. And I kept reconnecting myself to the lands of our peoples and doing ceremony, when I was hunting or ceremony, whenever I was stopping at a place to have lunch, and I would just put a lot of effort into trying to reconnect with the ancestors that were there. Because one of the things that they also told me was, our home isn't on the reservation. Our home is out on the lands. The reservation is just where people were forced, where people actually have homes out on the territories. And she said, our ancestors are waiting for us out there. You have to go back home. So getting indoctrinated in that since I was a young child, and moving into adulthood and doing the different things that I did, I completely got drawn right back into it all. But I think one of the big turning points for me was when I spent some time up in Fort Chipewyan. I think it was 2008 and 2007. I spent some time up in Fort Chipewyan, northern Alberta, in a sense, working with a bunch of students. I used to teach a course on environmental monitoring, and I was working for the Northern Lakes Community College at that time, and they hired me to come into the community of Fort Chipewyan to teach environmental monitoring. So students would get certified to go and start monitoring their lands. And when I was there were 3 moments in the time that I spent there where students had to take a break from the course I was in so they can bury their family members. And everybody that was passing away wasn't dying of natural causes. They were all dying from rare forms of cancer. And while I was there, some of the students were diagnosed with cancer. And one of them, he brought his dog to the veterinarian, and the vet said, "Oh, your dog's got cancer in his stomach." And he goes, "How's that possible?" And he goes, "Well, he's probably drinking out of the lake, and he shouldn't be doing that." And how are you supposed to explain that to a dog? So you have all these factors that led into things that kind of really, really turned me around and got me really engaged in trying to confront this thing that is ravaging our communities, and it was threatening to go through our lands. One of the pipelines coming from the tar sands was threatening to go through our lands. But we had elders come into that course that were teaching stuff about the history. One of them came in with a breathing apparatus in an oxygen bottle, and he said he had one of those rare forms of cancer, and he didn't think it was going to last very long, and he didn't. But when he was in there, he was explaining to all of us that there's an old legend of their people. When they're nomadic, they said the medicine people that were with them stopped aside and told them to wait there, to camp out there for a week. And he was going to go through a ceremony and take some medicines and allow himself to die for a while. But he was going to come back. They just had to keep him wrapped. So he went into this death state. And during that death state, he got all these dreams and visions. And it talked about the future, and he prophesied what was going to happen. And he told their people that in the future, the animals are going to attack and start killing their people, and the rivers are going to run red. They said, "I think that's happening now because the animals are all getting sick, and we're eating them. We're eating the animals from the land, the caribou, the buffalo. We're eating the berries out of our territories, and we're getting sick, and our people are dying from it. The water is killing us. The water is killing us right now because that's essentially everywhere through our lands. We don't have any safe place to drink water now." That was really astonishing for me. I was unfolded. There's a medical doctor, Dr. O'Connor, that was working there at the time, and he was ostracized from the medical community from working there for speaking out in public about the rare forms of cancer, and he almost took his medical license. He ended up moving to New Brunswick. And that was the only way he could do it. He ended up just still keeping his patients in Fort Chipewyan, but he had to deal with them over Skype. And nurses working with the patients that he had. But that was the thing that the government did, was that they told him, "If you don't keep quiet about this, we're going to take your medical license from you." And it was really for me. I ended up having to move away, and the community members were left stranded on their own again. So that was one of the big turning points. I came home after that, and I just decided, they want to put a pipeline through our territories that comes from there. We're going to stop it. And the Enbridge Pipeline Project was one that they're proposing to put through our territories, the Northern Gateway Enbridge Pipeline Project, an oil pipeline. We stopped it. We ended up killing it a few years ago. It was a massive campaign. It wasn't just us, but we're literally the only ones that were in their way. It was doing campaigns and trying to sign these documents to say that, they were opposed to the pipeline going through, and there's a lot of public outcry against it. The National Energy Board had a hearing on it, and they ended up having almost 100% of the people speak against it. They went through BC, and our people were some of the ones that stood up and said, we're not letting this pipeline come through our lands. But quite literally, the only people who were actually in the way of the pipeline project was us.
Yeah, I hear that story so often, and that all of that was super powerful. And thank you for speaking on that.
Yeah.
This is the Final Straw Radio Show, and I'm William Goodenough. We are talking with Smogulkim, who is a hereditary chief of the Likhts'amisyu clan, about his efforts to build a reoccupation village on his territory in so-called BC. Will you talk a little bit about the reoccupation camp? How did the idea for this come about?
Well, we've been wanting to do it for a while, our clan, but I was always super busy working in with the Unistoten people. That's a lot of time working with the Unistoten people out on their territory. But like I said earlier, when I left their camp, I decided to come back to our home community. When I did that, I started meeting with my clan and saying, I've left the Unistoten camp. And I just want to let you guys know that I've left the camp and I don't plan on going back. And they were pretty excited about that. They were like, oh, you're going to come and start working for us now. This is what you're going to do. You've done a lot of work for another clan to help them protect their territory. Now it's your responsibility to help us protect our own territories. And they said, come up with something and we'll go with it. We know how to do that. So I decided I'm going to have to figure this out. And I knew the pipeline route, I knew the territories, and I knew some of the old village sites. So I started working on some of the other chiefs in my clan, and one of them, a retired logger, and one's a retired general contractor. So one knows how to build things, and another guy still has big machinery. We decided, well, why don't we just build a village? Why don't we just talk to the clan and then make a commitment to just begin rebuilding our village out there and start moving back out on the lands. A lot of people are retired in our clan, and they can go and just live out there again. So we decided to do that. We had a clan meeting, and the clan was all excited about it, and we began reoccupying the territory this spring. And we're building cabins up there.
I totally love that. What are some of the things that the projects that you're excited about in the camp? What sort of space is going to be set up?
Well, we're reoccupying it. So we have, right at this moment, there are 5 planned buildings. 3 of them are under construction, and they're log cabins. So it takes a lot longer to build those. They're buildings, so you have to meticulously carve out each log to fit perfectly on top of the other, which is a really long and drawn-out process, but that's what we're doing right now. We're also there's 3 log cabins, and we're looking at building 2 more stick frame cabins. So as soon as those log cabins are done, we're going to do like the conventional style framing with 2x6s and 2x10s, construction of more cabins, which would be a lot quicker. It'll fraction of the time to build one of those in a log building. But what we're going to be doing is building those in this summer or this winter. We're going to be moving out there. A number of people will be living up there for the winter, basically carving out a new life out on our territories again. But that's one of the main projects. We have another big project as well. Another thing that we're doing is we're in talks right now with the David Suzuki Foundation and the University of Northern British Columbia and the Indigenous Climate Action Network. We're talking with them about the possibility of engaging in a process where we start building a climate change research center. So what we want to do, we want to build a center that has an interpretive center in it that talks about climate change itself, that will serve as an educational tool for people coming in from schools, from universities, just everyday folk that want to come out and just learn a little bit about it and engage in an interpretive center. The other part of the climate change research center is laboratories. So we've met with the University of Northern British Columbia, and they actually gave us a tour of the lab spaces that they have there and educated us on how big of a space we need, the type of infrastructure that we'd have to consider, and the planning part of it. And our clan was really, really excited about that. We just did that last week. So we have a lot of partners that are committed with us now at following through with this climate change research center idea. And I guess the last project that we're engaged in right now is we're beginning the process of we have a legal team assembled, and where a lot of the funds came out of our own pockets to secure it. We didn't do any fundraising. We tried to get some fundraising off the ground, but we're not quite as popular as the other front lines. But we do have a fundraiser that we did start for the Climate Change Research Center, the reoccupation of the village, and the legal case. So what we want to do with this legal case, we want to challenge the Canadian state, and we want to have a really good look at what's happening with this Environmental Assessment Act. Is it effective? Is it effective? What's going on with it? And how does it relate to Indigenous rights? How does it relate to our rights as individuals, as people who are out on our territories, whose territories are really devastated since contact? We have a massive reservoir that was created for an aluminum smelter on the coast that stretches right across the entire southern part of our territories. We also have a mine disaster that happened in 1985 called the Equity Mine Project. They had a massive spill from the tailings pond, and it ended up creating acid rock drainage, and they don't know how to deal with it. All they know how to do is they're going to try and contain the acidic fluid that's flowing out of the tailings pond, and they have a treatment facility to try and neutralize the acidic compounds, make it safe enough to go into the ecosystem again. But it's a massive project. They've got huge, giant tanks that will take in the water, and they do it with one of the main ingredients to treat it with is lime. So they mix that in with it, and it neutralizes the acids. And it goes through this process where it's actually, again, allowed to go back into the environment, but it's quite warm when it goes in. So as it flows down the mountain, it starts to cool off a little bit. But, when I told you I taught that environmental monitoring course, I remember taking a group of students from northern BC out to that mine and visiting it, and I asked the biologists out there, how long is this expected to last for? And the biologist said, well, millions of years. I don't think it's really, there's no life for it. And I said, well, who's going to ensure that somebody's going to be here 5,000 years from now to make sure that it's still taken care of? And he goes, I can't control any of that, and I don't think anybody can. And he says, I'm going to do the best job that I can right now to make sure that I can contain it. But after this, who knows what's going to happen in the future? Those are the types of things that we have to take into account as with food and people. Like that massive reservoir wiped out a whole caribou herd. We had a massive caribou herd that used to travel through here, a migratory woodland caribou herd, and it went up to Tahltan territory, traveled down to Gitsan territory and Wet'suwet'en territory, and then into Tsilhqot'in territory, and into Shuswap territory by Kamloops. There's a huge herd that used to travel back and forth, but when it flooded that reservoir in 1952, that entire herd drowned. So we're dealing with so many impacts, trauma after trauma. We share the same stories as other Indigenous peoples. Or people were hit by disease. We lost 3/4 of our population between 1820 and 1865. After that, our people were forced onto reservations. The survivors, the 1/4 that was left of our population, who were still grieving from their recent losses, were forced onto reservations, and then as soon as that happened, their kids were apprehended and taken into Indian residential schools. So when that finally got kind of disbanded in the late 1950s, it actually continued up until 1989 in small pockets, but the larger part of the Indian residential school system started getting disbanded around the 1960s. That happened, they decided to, instead of apprehending their kids and putting them into Indian residential schools, they would apprehend them and put them through the foster care system, and children were adopted throughout all over the world are taken away from their home community, from their families, and being forced to be raised with white families from all over the world who are paying. They're actually paying the government for these children. Our children became commodities to the world. Our children haven't made their way home. Some of them have, and we do have 60 scoop survivor groups in our communities, where these 60 scoop children are coming home as adults now, looking for culture, looking for identity, and trying to find a way to heal themselves. This is the onslaught that we've had to deal with, not just oil and gas pipelines, but the whole machine of colonialism just ravaged through our lands and our people and our populace. And we're still reeling from it, but we're not backing down. We know that we still have a fight in our hands. If we're going to find justice in this colonial world, we're going to do it to put a lot of effort into it. And we can just be traumatized constantly. We're going to have to start fighting. So a lot of us have been working on healing of our own and taking leadership roles to do that.
I think that's really amazing. And I think that, healing and understanding, trauma and intergenerational trauma is, I think, so important too. And thank you for talking about that. And like the ongoing violence of the settler colonial state machine are, numerous to mention.
Yeah, everywhere. It's all over the planet. As individuals, there's tribes from all over the planet, some who aren't around anymore because they're completely wiped off the face of the earth. They're hunted to extinction. But the ones that survived that onslaught are still here today, and we still understand how important it is for us to maintain our culture, to maintain our identity, and to fight for some kind of justice, because there's tribes all over the planet right now that are facing the dangers of colonialism, and the corporations that have forced themselves on our lands are still threatening them. And they're protected by the police forces. Like the RCMP, for example, in Canada are basically security force for the Corporation of Canada.
Definitely. And I remember seeing in your promo video that you had to deal with the RCMP. Would you talk a little bit about that? And are there sort of useful tactics that you've developed for managing their scrutiny and harassment? Or like ground you still need to cover or would like to cover?
Well, for years, I was one of the things that we have access to is people have gone through the Access of Information Act in Canada to get information from the government on certain things. And some people have actually gone in and asked questions to the government, like through the Access to Information Act. Are there any files in RCMP that we can have access to, the National RCMP database? And some of the things that they've been managing to get out of it are, there's a annual report that the RCMP issues, and they call it, I think it's the threats to national interest. And in 2014, the Wet'suwet'en were put on a list as number one. In 2015, it was the Unistoten was put on number one on that list. 2016, 2017, the Likhts'amisyu of the Unistoten were number one. And quite literally, I was the only Likhts'amisyu that was actually helping organize at the Unistoten camp to make sure that people were going to be kept safe there. And I was also looking at logistical support to make sure that, when winter comes, we're going to be prepared to make it through the winter because we were way out in the bush. So I did a lot of that work for them. And, just from that work alone, the Canadian state decided to say that I was the number one threat to them in 2016 and 2017. I haven't seen any reports since. Ever since I left the Unistoten camp, like a lot of other activists, I was followed around, I was harassed. Police would just show up and introduce themselves to me. Like I bought a truck, and I got pulled over 1 hour after I bought the truck, and the police officers had the Department of Transportation go through my truck and try and take me off the road for really ridiculous infractions. The mechanics were blown away. I had to bring it in and get some things fixed on it, and they're like, they took you off the road for that? That doesn't make any sense. That's so retarded. And they fixed it. I put it on the road, but that hasn't stopped. As soon as we started the village, the occupation out on our territory, the RCMP were visiting us on a daily basis. We were really, really lucky because we decided to build a village where the provincial government had a recreation site. So the BC Recreation Sites and Trails Department came out and visited us. And was, what is it you guys are doing? I said, well, we're reoccupying our village. Can you tell us about it? So we told them about it, and they decided to go back to their own archives and investigate what it was that we were claiming. And they realized that in their own archival documents, there's actually an old village site there. And it showed where all the cabins were, and like, you're absolutely right. This is your place. In 2008, your people were forced away from here. And we said, we know that. And they said, well, we have it documented, so we can't dispute that. And we're certainly not going to get in your way because this is justifiably your village site. There are no treaties to say that you've surrendered or ceded any of that stuff. So rather than get into confrontation with you guys, we'd like to see if we can enter into a partnership agreement where you guys would begin to take care of the recreation site. We would help support you guys in saying that, there's a village site that has been resurrected here by the Likhts'amisyu clan. And they did that, and they said, well, we can go talk to the RCMP now because we understand that they're harassing you guys, and what we'll do is we'll tell them that you guys are partners with the provincial government, the Recreation Sites and Trails Department, and we're going to ask that you guys be protected from harassment from the rednecks that live in the valley that are coming and threatening to attack you guys. So it turned the entire thing around. The RCMP didn't know what to do. They basically told the BC Recreation Sites and Trails Department, well, if you're going to have them out there, if they're going to be your partners, provide a sat phone with them on safety. That way we don't have to keep going up there all the time. Meanwhile, they were acting as security forces for the pipeline before that, and they're happy to go there every day. But as soon as they're tasked with protecting us, they didn't want to do that anymore. They asked to give us a sat phone.
That's wild.
So now we're not harassed like we were before. RCMP still do drop by, and they just take really quick visits, and they leave again. But they're not. Their presence isn't the way it was before, and it's because of a partnership that we have with some actually really good people in the Recreation Sites and Trails Department.
Fantastic! I'm so glad that solidarity exists.
Yeah, it was remarkable. I had no idea it was going to come to that. I thought, okay, these come out and they're going to try and tell us that we have no right to be there, but we do have the Supreme Court of Canada case from 1997 between the Wet'suwet'en and the Gitxsan and the federal government of Canada that does state that our lands are unceded and we do have decision-making powers. So that's what we're exercising.
That's really, really cool. Are you still looking for people to come volunteer?
All the time. We still have a lot of building projects on the way, and trying to get that stuff done with a small handful of people at a time is really, really difficult. It's really slow. It doesn't mean that we're not doing it. There's still cabins going up right now. Like today, they're still cutting logs and piecing it together, and we need as much help as we can. If people want to come out and visit us at the camp, they're more than welcome to. If they want to donate to us, they're more than welcome to do that as well. We do have a website, Likhts'amisyu, Likhts'amisyu.com. And there's also a Facebook page at the Sovereign Likhts'amisyu. And there's a GoFundMe site that has been active, but it kind of died down for a while. But it's still relevant. If people want to donate, they can donate there as well. But we do take e-transfers from people as well, and all that information's on our website and on the Facebook page.
That's awesome. I will link all of those in the show notes if people are interested in finding out more information.
And quite a few with fundraisers, because we are running low on funds for keeping people fed out on the territory. The funds that we've been raising so far go towards the fuel that we need to run the machines to kind of clear the spaces for the cabins. There's not a whole lot, but it does actually cost. And then the food on top of that. There's a lot of food that needs to go in and feed the people that are up there right now. And the materials, the building materials for the cabins themselves, we're using a lot of the donations to purchase some of the building materials for the cabins. But it's a pretty big and expensive endeavor, so if people want, they can go ahead and contact us through, like I said, the Facebook page or the website. And there's an email address. I think it's Likhts'amisyu@gmail.com. You can contact us through any of those and let us know if they're going to be doing any fundraisers for us, and we'll work with them on that.
That's amazing. And building a village is no small matter, so it makes so much sense that funds are needed.
Yeah, because we're grassroots and a lot of us have been paying out of our own pockets for a while, especially with the legal case. It gets super expensive. The legal case is going to actually cost, for the first year, we're estimating it to be about $180,000. We have to start fundraising for that. And our legal teams are given the go-ahead by the leadership, myself and some of the other chiefs, to begin applying for grants, legal grants, and legal funds from different agencies all across North America to assist us with that. But if we can get any kind of organizing from the ground level, from the grassroots, towards helping us with all of our initiatives, that would be amazing. But yeah, we're active. We're out there. We're doing what we have to do. This Sunday, actually, in a couple of days, our chiefs are going to be donning our regalia and traveling to the front lines for the first time since the raid. We haven't been out because Mrs. Diane, my mother, passed away. She was one of our chiefs, and we were too busy taking care of her just prior to the raids. And after the raids, we had to bury her and deal with all the funerals and the feasting that had to happen in the ceremonies. And then the following grief that followed that, we had to deal with that as well. But we feel like we're ready to engage ourselves in showing solidarity and support for the Gidimden and Unistoten. So we're actually traveling out to the territories this Sunday.
This Sunday? Wow, that's amazing. That is when this show will air. So if people would like to come out and volunteer, is there a specific skill set that you particularly need?
If we can get carpenters, that would be really handy. But people can come out and just participate and learn how to do a lot of the stuff. Like we do have a few people who've come out that don't have any construction skills, but they're willing to learn those skills, and we have people out there to teach them. So there's people out there working with skilled people to learn the basics of the construction industry. Because, like I said, one of the chiefs was a general contractor. His name is Zahale, and he's out there tutoring people on the construction processes so that they can gain the skills in the construction industry. So even after they leave the camp, they can apply for work at a construction site somewhere and say, I've got these types of skills. This is what I've learned, and I get a job here. So it's transferable skills.
Absolutely. Are you in need of any sort of legal support or legal advice apart from funds?
A really well put together legal team, and they're working with other front lines. Like there's the Unistoten, there's the Gidimden, and the Likhts'amisyu. Like we all have legal teams, and they're all working together with the larger tribal legal team that we have for the Wet'suwet'en itself. So there's basically 4 different legal teams that are actually meeting with each other and sharing information, talking about the strategies that they're going to be employed in to work together to create something that's quite formidable. But it's going to take a lot of funds, and that's the key thing. We do need this fundraising throughout the world. Like I know there's people who've done fundraising for the Wet'suwet'en in the past when I was at Unistoten camp, that we're doing fundraising in other countries. was just phenomenal just to see that kind of stuff going on. And all across North America, people were doing fundraisers, so we're still doing that call out yet. We're still in need of that. So the Likhts'amisyu, we do have a case, and like I said, it's going to be approximately $180,000 for the first year. But it's a unique case. It's one that nobody's ever done before. And I'm not going to talk about any of the details of it, but it's going to become quite a surprise for the state once we decide to file it.
That's really, really exciting. Thank you so much for your time and being willing to speak with me for the radio show. Is there anything that I neglected to ask that you'd like to speak on now?
No, not really. I think I covered everything. I'm glad that people, your listeners, are engaged in topics like this, and if they want to become more engaged with people who are actually on the front lines and making change, they can visit us. Like I said, come to our website, Likhts'amisyu.com, or you can go to the Facebook page, Sovereign Likhts'amisyu, and have a look at what we're doing and find a way to contact us. And if you can't find a way to support us physically or financially, do that. Get creative with doing stuff like that. We're really looking forward to having people from all over the place participate in the change that we're initiating.
I agree, and it sounds so exciting and like a lot of work, but like a lot of really good work.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure and an honor to get to speak with you, and I hope that we can work together in future.
Yeah, likewise.
Thanks for listening to our interview with Smogelkim. Keep them in your thoughts today as they are marching out in full regalia in the name of Wet'suwet'en unification. To learn more, to get involved, and to donate to the building and legal fees, you can visit their website, Likhts'amisyu.com, and that is LIKHTSAMISYU. You can also go to facebook.com/Likhts'amisyu to connect with them there. And you can also be in touch about doing a fundraiser for them if that's in your capacity.
This is The Final Straw, and I'm Bursa Gunas. This show will later be archived at thefinalstrawradio.noblogs.org, and you can email us with questions and suggestions at thefinalstrawradio@riseup.net or thefinalstrawradio@protonmail.com. If you'd like to use any episode for your project or radio show, feel free to do so. Just send us an email to let us know. If you care to, you can send us letters at The Final Straw Radio, P.O. Box 6004, Asheville, North Carolina, 28816. This show is brought to you by Firestorm Books and Coffee. Located at 610 Haywood Road, Firestorm Books and Coffee is a worker-owned co-op in Asheville specializing in offbeat, underground, and independent literature. You can find a catalog of Firestorm's books and zines, plus a full calendar of events up at their website, firestorm.coop.